Hello everyone. Today I want to show off my automated fusion reactor system. It's broken up into three different parts. There is the fusion reactor and all of its associated components, the fuel production section, which is over here, and I am producing deuterium, tritium, and helium-3. And then down here, this is the cobble and scrap generation that runs the matter fabricator. So first off, I'm going to start with the fuel production system, and then look at the fusion reactor, and then I will go back and look at the scrap production system. Now, a lot of the numbers and stuff from this are based off of Nebris. He did a lot of work with the fusion reactor and working out how many supercondensators and superconductors and things like that you need to have it run at full efficiency. Although all the mathematics behind the fuel system I came up with myself, and then he had a similar scrap production system, which I have then modified. Now, for just like with most of my builds, I'm utilizing routers absolutely as much as possible because I love them and they're incredibly efficient. And so because I can do that, it shrinks the overall size of the whole system significantly. So first off, we'll start with the fuel production. Fuel for the nuclear reactor is it takes the two isotopes of hydrogen, tritium and deuterium, and then fuses them together. So in order to make the isotopes of hydrogen, first you need actual hydrogen. So to make hydrogen, I use electrolyzers. And the electrolyzers take water that comes out of these aqueous accumulators down here and pipes them in and converts and splits them into their oxygen and hydrogen components so that I get hydrogen cells and compressed air. Oops. So this is the recipe. It takes 6 water stills, 5 empty cells, and I get 4 hydrogen and 1 compressed air. And then to make deuterium, you have to take the hydrogen cells and run it through a centrifuge, and it takes 4 hydrogen cells to make 1 deuterium, and it takes 150 seconds. And then to make tritium, you have to run 4 deuterium cells through a centrifuge to make 1 tritium. So that is how all the machines are based when they scale. So I get, what was it? I believe it was 5, or I get 4 hydrogen cells out of each of these guys. So each one of these runs 1 centrifuge. And the way that this system works is that this is the same system breakdown that I have in my B system, which if you look back earlier when I was making for the automated frame production and how I'd have the squeezers and the centrifuges set up, it's the same basic idea. I have the water coming from the aqueous accumulators running down one side of the machines and connecting to all 4 of them. And then I have the power coming from over here running down the other side and then splitting up and powering all 8 electrolyzers. And then in order to get the empty cells into the electrolyzers, I use a router. And so the empty cells come in from here and go into this relay. And then the relay acts as a buffer which keeps this router full. And so then this router is set to insert into the bottom sides because Greg Tech machines require that empty cells go into the bottom of the electrolyzers. And then I have a speed boost, and that is the router that connects, that runs all 4 of these machines. Now, the router is physically touching these 4 machines, and then since they're physically touching, you can access all 4 of them. But there's a wire in the way, and it's not able to touch these 4. So I'm using a thing that I call a furnace wire, and basically what it is are furnaces that go along and connect the inventory. So then this inventory is then connected to this one, so this router can see all 4 machines. Once the water is electrolyzed and it finishes that process, come on, then the hydrogen and the compressed air cells get pulled out by this router, and then you can see the hydrogen going down one path, and once it's finished, then the compressed air goes out the other path. And so this router is able to see all 8 machines because of the furnace wire that's over there. And it extracts from the south sides, so it's extracting from a side of the machine, from the electrolyzers, and then it ejects to the west. So it has an ejector upgrade and a machine upgrade. And the west is this chest right here. So this is my buffer chest. And then I have 2 emerald filter pipes. And what they do with autarkic gates. And then this one is set to only pull out hydrogen. And this one is set to only pull out compressed air cells. The compressed air cells go into a extractor, and then I put a transformer upgrade in there so I can run it on the same 128 power as the electrolyzers run at. And then this empties the canisters so that they can be recycled back into the system. And then it's pulled out and sent back into the system. Now I have 2 here. That's not necessary, but that's just what I have at the moment because I'm going to add another section later. And then the hydrogen goes out and goes into the first bank of centrifuges. Now I think this is really cool because I can stack these machines on top of each other just like this where pipes can't reach them, and the only reason I can do this is because routers don't need pipes. So I can make very tight and close in constructions with my machines. So this router acts as another, or this relay acts as another buffer, which then pumps into this router. And this router inserts into the top sides of the centrifuges, and it's set to not have thoroughness. So what it will do is it will cycle through all the machines and put 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then so it will evenly distribute the items throughout all the machines, so I don't have to have something like a red power manager to keep the items perfectly balanced. Every once in a while, if there's an odd number, there might be 1 extra cell here or there, but it will, over time, it balances itself out. And then, so these guys convert the hydrogen cells into deuterium cells. And then when the deuterium cells are done, then I have this guy, which extracts from the south sides and of the centrifuges, and then ejects to the north. So it puts it into this buffer chest. And then here are the deuterium cells. Now, in the fusion reactor, you need to combine tritium and deuterium together, and then the byproduct is helium in an empty cell. But you need to keep some of this deuterium before you send the rest of it on to be turned into tritium. And so the conversion rate again is 4 to 1. So it's 4 deuterium to make 1 tritium. So I need to be producing a total of 10. Well, here I have 20 cells, which then converts to 4 tritium. And the way that this works is that I have a sorting machine. And the sorting machine, it's the same system that I have on the automated scented paneling system back in my other B video, and that's the same basic principle this works off of. So what it does is it collects the first 16 deuterium that come out, which corresponds to the 16 of these guys, and then sends them down the red line. And then the red line puts them into this router, which inserts into the centrifuges and distributes them through here to make tritium. And then then I have 4 extra over here, which corresponds to the yellow line. And so then they get sent off to the relay and then into this tesseract, which then inserts them into the bottom cell of the reactor. And then the tritium gets pulled out by this router and then ejected into another buffer and then pulled out and sent into this tesseract, which sends them to the top of the reactor. And then, so I'll explain the reactor and then come back and explain the helium-3. And so if we go over to the reactor, if we follow those tesseracts, over here is the fusion reactor. So here's the reactor itself, and then here's the fusion coil that goes around it. And then this right here is a high voltage cable, which I've left in place just in case I ever need it again. But what I do is I hook it up to my AESU over here. So if the power buffer inside of the fusion reactor ever goes below 40 million, then I can just close this wire again, and it will recharge the fusion reactor. But the way the system's set up is I shouldn't ever have to do it, but I have it there just in case I do, or I shut things off and I have to restart things. Because in order to start the tritium-deuterium fusion process, it requires a starting input energy of 40 million EU. And so as you can see, the deuterium is put into the bottom slot, and the tritium is put into the top slot. And then when it finishes the reaction, it will output a... Come on. Helium cell and empty cell. It went really fast. And so that way I'm able to get my cells back that I put into the system. And so in order to insert, I didn't want to have a whole bunch of pipes up here. So what I did was I made another furnace wire, which goes from here where there's 4 furnaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it connects the inventories all along. And then so I can put routers down below, and they can access the fusion reactor without having to be directly adjacent. So over here, this is the deuterium tesseract. That's where the deuterium is being produced over there. It gets input into this relay, which then puts the deuterium into this router, which inserts into the bottom side of the fusion reactor. And so that keeps the bottom slot of the fusion reactor full. Then this guy right here, well, let's start over here first. Then this one's a little more complicated, but it's the same basic principle. What it does is over here we have the tritium, and then the tritium gets put into this buffer, and this is a red power buffer with individual inventories depending upon the side that the material is input from, and then gets pulled out by this sorting machine and inserted into the router here, which inserts into the top side of the fusion reactor, and which then goes up here and places it in the top. So the fuel, or the waste that comes out of the machine, is helium. And you can go take the helium and convert it into cooling cells, which is a very efficient way of making more superconductors, and you can make superconductor wires and stuff like that. But what I'm doing is I'm recycling the helium back into the system. Because if you look at the fusion reactor, let's just run back here really fast to my Greg Tech computer cube. Don't mind the mess. So here's the fusion reactor recipe. You can look up all the different fusion reactor recipes inside of a Greg Tech computer cube, but it has to have power, and it takes 32 EU per tick in order to run. So for the tritium and deuterium recipe, it takes 40 million EU to start the reaction. You get 32 million EU out per tick over 1,024 ticks, for a total of 33 million EU. And the waste that comes out is a helium cell. But if you go to the next recipe, if you take a helium-3 cell and combine it with a deuterium cell, then you get another helium cell back out again. And it takes more energy to start, but if the reactor is already heated up and it's in process, then you don't have to put that startup energy. And you get double the energy out, or no, you get the same amount of energy out, excuse me, but for twice as long. So you get double the total number of energy for the input fuel. So what I am doing is we go back. The reactor return tesseract pulls out the empty cells and the helium, and it comes over here and gets reinserted into the system. So reactor return goes down, and then there's a diamond pipe under here which directs the flow this way. And then for this guy, I have the helium centrifuge. So any helium cells that get pulled out of the reactor as waste get sent over to my helium processing area, where they are converted into helium-3. And so if we go back over here, this guy right here is my helium processing unit. And the way that it works is the helium comes in, the helium cells go in, get inserted into the top side of these centrifuges, and it will only go into these because they're not connected to any other inventories. And as you can see, there's heliums sitting in here, waiting, and they're evenly distributed because the router will evenly distribute amongst the machines. And once they reach 16, because helium takes 16 helium cells, and then you get 15 of those cells back, which you can then recycle into the system for making more deuterium and tritium. And then you get 1 helium-3 cell. So every time these fill up, I get 4 helium cells. And then this guy right here extracts from the south sides, and it has an item filter on there, so it will only take out helium-3 from industrial centrifuges, and it will eject them to the top, into this tesseract, which sends it back to the reactor return. So it will send it back over to the sorting system over there. And then this guy, what he does is he extracts empty cells, and he sends them back to the reactor return. So I guess technically this is a duplicate, but at the moment, I had that there for other reasons. So originally what I was trying to do was I wanted to separate the helium and insert it directly into the reactor, but I found out that that wouldn't work because what I need to do is I need to set up a priority system. So I will always have more tritium than I will have helium-3, and the two of them are replaceable in the fusion reactor recipe, so I can swap one out for the other during processing while the fusion reactor is up and running. And so what I wanted to do was directly insert the helium into the top of the fusion reactor so that it would so it would insert before the router that was inserting the tritium underneath could. But it turns out that the router would always beat out anything else. So what I needed to do was come up with a priority system so that any helium-3 that's in the system will always have priority over tritium. But if there isn't any helium-3 in the system, then it will default back to its secondary fuel, which is tritium. And so over here, the helium-3 gets sent back to the reactor return, which then goes through and gets sorted into this tesseract. And this guy right here is helium-3 input. And so for this, in order to set up that priority system, I had to do a little bit of red power magic. And this is also a similar principle to what I was doing for the scented paneling production, but it's slightly different. And what it does is this is a buffer. And so, like I said in the previous video, a buffer has 5 independent inventory slots. And each inventory slot is dependent upon the side that the items are input from. So any items input from this side, which happens to be tritium, will be put into this slot, whereas any items that happen to be put into this side, which is helium-3, goes into this slot, these slots here. And then what I did was I used this sorting machine, and its setup is that it will always run, and then this guy right here says I will pull out any item from the adjacent inventory. But this system right here will make it prioritize whatever item is in the top left corner first. So this buffer, since it will only allow helium-3 to be in the top upper left-hand corner, won't allow tritium to be in the top upper left-hand corner, it will always pull out helium-3 first, and then if there isn't any helium-3 in here, then it will pull out tritium. So what it does is it pulls out the fuel depending upon what it sees in the buffer, and then inserts it into the router. So right now there's helium-3 waiting in queue, and then as you can see it's red right here. So I pulled out 4 helium-3, and then pulled out however much tritium was in there at the time. And so it's red because it's holding that stack of tritium, waiting for this slot to be open. And then so as soon as this slot is open, then it will insert the tritium in and then pull out the next chunk of helium-3 first if it's there, and if it's not, it'll pull the tritium. And then this router inserts into the top side of the fusion reactor like I mentioned before. So once this internal buffer of tritium cells is used up, then it will instantly insert the helium that's down here into that slot. And the reason that I don't have to put back in that initial I won't have to put in the 60,000 because it's helium startup energy is because the fusion reactor is already in process. It has, just like all Greg Tech machines, it pulls one of each type of cell and kind of holds them in an invisible inventory where you can't see them and interact with them. And then at that point, then it does the reaction, then finishes, and then ejects from that invisible inventory. So even if I don't have anything in here, it will, like if it uses up the last cell right here, it will continue the reaction even with on that last cell with an empty slot here. So the fusion reactor will never stop even if this is empty for that last cycle. And then so that is the fuel. That's the fuel system and the fusion reactor input system. And then this over here is based upon Nebrus's work. If you look, he has a whole video where he works out the difference between EU per tick and EU per packet and the breakdown of how to get the most amount of energy out of a fusion reactor and then funnel it into a matter fabricator. And so the fusion reactor is outputting 1 million EU per tick. And what we have to do, so this line, this superconductor line that's right there, is at 1 million EU. And the reason I have all this glass here is because if I were to touch this line, it would instantly kill me. Even though I have all quantum stuff on, even if I might grab a chest plate on, this line would still kill me. And then it would also discharge all the internal battery in my items. So I have it encased in glass, and I still need to put more glass, but I took it out because I was messing with it a little bit. And then these right here are super condensators. And what they do is they convert the 1 million EU per tick down to 8,192? 8,000 something EU per tick. Stupid Enderman. I hope he jumps on this. That'd be hilarious. And then so I have that 8,000 line right here. When if you look at a matter fabricator, yeah, 8,192. That's the maximum amount of EU that it can take per packet. And so I have 8 packets coming in through these supercondensers, and then it's going through the superconductor line into my matter fabricator. And so my matter fabricator just sits here and runs. The reason that it does this little pulsy thing is because it actually takes more power than the fusion reactor can put out. It used to be perfectly balanced, but I believe there was a patch that went through or something like that. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But that is why it kind of does this bouncy thing. But it's still way faster than it's incredibly than using solar panels or anything like that, unless you have tons and tons and tons of solar panels. So what I have here is it's generating the UU matter, and then it pulls it out and puts it. This is a quantum chest, and if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see I have 5,600 pieces of UU matter in there at the moment. So the quantum chest, don't break it while there's any items in there, but it's like a barrel. So if you right-click on it, you put the items back in. Left-click, you pull out a stack. And if you shift left-click, you'll pull out one at a time. So, but yeah, if you were to break this, then it would all of the stacks that are in there would be lost except for the last stack, which I did that once accidentally. So that's my storage system at the moment. I have so much UU matter, I don't really know what to do with it. But in order to keep the scrap full on the matter fabricator, I have to generate the scrap. And this over here is based on the same principle that Nebris also came up with for his scrap section, in that it takes 3 overclocked recyclers in order to generate enough scrap to keep up with the fusion reactor. But over here, we have igneous extruders, which are generating cobble, and then the cobble gets sent through into relays, piped into relays, which then sends them through pneumatic tubes. And then the pneumatic tubes insert them into this router, which inserts into the top sides of the recyclers. And then one key point about this patch of for routers and recyclers is you actually have to physically type in the word recycler here. You can't click through and get it. It won't recognize it, but you can actually type in the name and it will know where to go. And then speed boost, bandwidth, and so on. One thing I tried to do, and then this side, this guy just extracts the scrap, puts it into a tesseract for scrap, which then ejects it into the matter fabricator. But one thing I tried was I had all of these cobble generators set up in a box like that over there, which I don't know if you watch Direwolf's videos, he does that for his mass fabricators, and if you watch the server videos that Direwolf does on the Pahicraft server, Soren made, I don't know, it's like 64 of these or 128 of them or something, a ridiculous number, and then had a router pulling out of all of them. But what I found when I did that and I had a router here, I was actually hitting the maximum speed that a router could go, even with the speed up, the speed boost. And it couldn't access all of the inventories fast enough. There were just too many of them generating items too quickly, and it couldn't input items fast enough into this relay to run the scrap, to generate enough scrap fast enough for the matter fabricator. So what I did was I went to red power, and I have the red power pneumatic tubes doing it instead with relays, because with them, as soon as there's an item there, they just spit it out. It doesn't have to be pulled out by the router. So this system seems to work really well. I have 25 igneous extruders here, and these last 4 are actually a little unnecessary. I don't really need them. Every once in a while I'll have to turn this one on or off, and so I'm going to be building a control system that will read if if for example this guy has scrap in it or doesn't have scrap in it, then what it will do is it will shut off 1 or 2 extra igneous extruders so that the system doesn't overflow. But anyway, that's my fusion reactor. I hope this helps. Feel free to use any of this if you want. It's completely automated, completely self-sufficient. It runs on both tritium and helium-3, and doesn't require any external input. Oh, one other thing. All of this stuff over here runs off parasitic power from the fusion reactor itself. So it takes some of the output of the fusion reactor and uses it to run all of its fuel production. So over here, I have an additional supercondensator running through a running through a high voltage transformer. So it goes 1 million EU, 8,192 EU, 2,000 high voltage. I think it's 2,000 something. Oh crap, I can't remember. 2,000, which then pulls it out and puts it back into my AESU. It's 2048 EU. So, thank you for watching. I hope this helps. Oh, another thing to show, to make sure that the system doesn't overflow, is I have a automatic shutoff for fuel production. So over here, in this relay, if this relay doesn't have deuterium in it, that means that it's run out of its buffer for the deuterium which goes into the bottom here. Then there's a gate that says if there are items in this inventory, emit a redstone signal. So if there aren't any items, it shuts off the redstone signal. This wireless transmitter goes over here to this, and this is an EU splitter. And what it does is if there's a redstone signal, it will actually split the wire here and stop power from traveling through. And so what it does is it shuts off all of the electrolyzers. So any fuel that's still in the centrifuges will continue to get processed and sent out, but the fuel that's in here will not. Or yeah. One thing to note about this is that the only way that you can emit a redstone signal to it and have it work is if you actually have old school redstone dust. Redstone wire won't work, direct redstone from this won't work. You have to have redstone dust. And then to kind of give a breakdown, because all these systems over here require a lot of packets of EU. And in order to make sure you utilize all of your packets, what I have here is it's coming out at high voltage, getting split down into 4 packets of high voltage here of 512. And then the 512 is split up into excuse me, 4 more packets here through the medium voltage, and then 4 of those packets are being split up here to run all the centrifuges. So in this way, I'm not losing any packets. I'm losing some packets that aren't being utilized potentially for over here, but all of the high voltage packets are being split properly. So yeah, now I'm going to finish. So I hope this helps. Feel free to use it. Thank you very much for watching. All right, bye-bye.